To thank you, Madam Clerk. And I would ask that you please rise for the national anthem. Thank you. Please be seated. We have regrets from Councillor Njima. All other councillors are present. On my right is Councillor Dave Thompson, Deputy Mayor Dave Thompson. To his left, Councillor Rob Foster. To his right, Councillor Lynn Timmers and Councillor Tony Brunet. On my left, Councillor Wayne McMillan, Councillor John Pachariva, and Councillor Paul McPherson. On my right is Ms. Julie Kirkelos. Julie is the clerk of the town of Lincoln and the acting director of corporate services. On my left is Mr. Michael Kirkopoulos, the chief administrative officer. And we also have additional staff from the planning department, Kathleen Dale, director of planning and development. From Public Works, Jillian Harris, the Manager of Environmental Services. From Community Services, Shannon McKay, the Acting Director of Community Services, and Sarah Ain, the Acting Associate Director of Recreation, Culture, and Special Services. Thank you. Thank you very much, staff, for attending. We have on the agenda next, the declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Thompson?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be declaring an interest with regards to item 6A due to the fact that there's a report entailed within that CM 18-10 regarding a report on public Wi-Fi for a company that I am employed by.
Very good. Thank you very much, Councillor. And the clerk is in receipt of your paperwork. Thank you for that. Do any members have any changes to the order of business detailed in the agenda? What is the pleasure of the committee on the proposed agenda? Any opposed? The motion is carried. And we begin with the adoption of the previous council minutes of May 7th, 2018. I have a motion moved by Councillor Foster and seconded by Councillor Brunet that the minutes of the May 7th, 2018 regular meeting of council be adopted. Are there any errors or omissions? There being none, your pleasure on the motion. The motion is carried. Councillors, is there any business arising from the minutes? There being none, we'll move on to the mayor's report. If we could just ask Councillor Thompson to come back in, that would be helpful. Next item on the agenda, ladies and gentlemen, is the mayor's report. I do have a report this evening, and it will be connected to further information that you will hear about on the agenda. I begin my message this evening by acknowledging the outstanding support of all emergency services providers, Niagara Regional Police, particularly 8th District, where most of our service comes from, Lincoln Fire Service, and also Niagara EMS. Last week was Police and First Responders Week, and every long weekend traffic safety is always a concern. In every case, these teams have individual and collective roles to play in providing a safe environment in the town of Lincoln. Over the past week and weekend, we unfortunately heard about a number of situations, accidents, some personal injury, and a terrible fire in one of our neighboring communities. And in each case, all of the emergency response teams were called to support victims and the communities, as well as ensuring that surrounding properties were protected to the greatest extent possible. We extend our thanks to all emergency responders and wish all impacted our heartfelt good wishes. This is important, ladies and gentlemen, not just because it is a label that we attach to a point in time, but because emergency services are an important part of the sustainability of our community and are representative of the value-added component of your tax dollars at work. This week is Public Works Week, and the theme is the power of public works. You will find many communications highlights throughout the week, including those you will find on www.lincoln.ca. Look for the playlist that features 5 videos on public work activities. I believe that Councillor in Public Works Chair Tony Brunet is one of the participating local stars. Is that correct, Councillor? There you go. On Thursday, the Grimsby Lincoln News will also have a featured article outlining many of the activities carried out by Public Works staff, including the Clean Water Program, wastewater infrastructure, roads and culvert maintenance, and rehabilitation, to name a few. On June the 2nd is the annual Touch a Truck and barbecue event. It's a great family event. There's enough to keep everyone involved. Of course, the fire truck, the aerial fire truck, will be on hand for some overhead photos of the crowd. This is one of our most popular community events. For parents, a good way to see where taxes are spent on specialized equipment. Later in the council agenda, you will be hearing about the importance of public health on communities. Since February, we have had the distinct pleasure of having Dr. Valerie Yeager, who is retired as the Medical Officer of Health from the region of Niagara, working in Lincoln on contract, where she has been instrumental in working with our service departments in better understanding the ways in which they interconnect, and therefore ensuring that the taxes you contribute generate the greatest impact on the growth and development of Lincoln. These activities are inclusive in our mission, vision, and values of a place to grow, a place to prosper, a place to belong. This council and staff are conscious of the importance of decisions and investments that influence a number of initiatives that recognize local health and health problems, increase our awareness and your awareness of the needs of Lincoln as a whole, as well as special needs. We have worked diligently to build our relationships at all levels of government and with a complete cross-section of community interest groups, including service clubs, education institutions, and faith groups. Like you, we understand that there are many and complex problems facing communities every day. Solutions need to be diverse and promote public and community involvement, no matter your race, religion, or place of origin. Many of the decisions that Council has made have been as a result of your direction. We understand the importance of considering the needs of children and youth, as well as middle-age and seniors. One way to determine the level of community success is to examine the programs along with the profile that identifies our community services and the state of our public health. In other words, what are the health issues specific to Lincoln? What are the barriers to better health for all? And where can Council focus its attention now and in the future? Dr. Yeager will complete her formal contract in July. and I am very pleased that we have been able to capture her expertise over the past few months in a way that puts us on the right track to measuring those programs, services, bricks and mortar that can be proven to be of significant benefit to our community. We are in a stronger position now to evaluate the supports we need and to provide affirmation to you on how activities are integrated, how departments are aligning activities to reach a high quotient of efficiency and effectiveness. There is a close relationship between the social determinants of health and economic development to needed infrastructure. If you are interested in understanding those relationships, you will be particularly interested in Dr. Yeager's report and the discussion points that will be raised by councillors. It will be worth watching more than once. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call anyone on council. You can email me at seaston@lincoln.ca. Lastly, I want to highlight that last week at Committee of the Whole, we received a presentation on the opioid crisis and how it is impacting our community. It is not as invisible as you may think, and there are families struggling to live with the results of this addiction. A second report included how to reach an understanding about diversity and inclusion in our community. Both reports were eye-opening. Diversity and inclusion go hand in hand, and organizations that successfully capitalize on the diversity of their staff consistently work to identify and address systemic barriers embedded within policies, practices, programs, and services that inadvertently exclude individuals or whole communities. This is and will be a focus for council and staff. It must also be a community conversation we have and normalize in Lincoln. Similarly, we must learn to talk about hard issues like the opioid crisis across Niagara. Lincoln, for that matter, any community in Niagara is not immune to health and social issues. We must destigmatize the topic and our ability to have such conversations. Council recognizes that these are challenging topics, but we also accept that we share a responsibility to take these discussions to you, the community. On that note, you live in Lincoln, where everyone strives to be a good neighbor, and children and youth are encouraged to achieve their very best. Through my time at the beginning of each meeting and other public engagements, I hope to send a message that Lincoln will deliberately set itself apart by instilling consideration and a sense of achievement in our everyday lives. You are part of those achievements. This is how we do it here. Many thanks for opening your homes to us. It is our pleasure to serve you. We now move on to the Regional Councilor's report. There is no Regional Councilor present this evening. And Council reports. Do any members of Council have items to report? Councilor Brunet.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, just a couple of quick comments. On May the 8th, I traveled to the regional headquarters for the Transportation Steering Committee meeting of May the 8th. Four main items on the agenda that day were the regional official plan amendment to transportation policies, the environmental assessment and preliminary design, Queen Elizabeth and Glendale Avenue interchange, the Transportation Steering Committee meetings minutes of February the 13th, and discussion under other business about the Ontario Bike Summit highlights that took place April 17th and 18th that Larry Chettle and I also attended from Active Transportation. I bring up the comment about the environmental assessment and preliminary design for the Queen Elizabeth and Glendale Avenue interchange so that Council is very well aware that as we have what we feel are pertinent issues, whether it's the Jordan improvement and the EA that we continue to move forward, or whether it's the finding a truck access, hopefully one day in Grimsby, that these are priorities, but along the same time, other municipalities are moving, and this, I can tell you that this project is being fast-tracked. It's a $6.6 million project. They want a shovel in the ground for 2019 to get ahead of the Canada Summer Games in 2021. So to me, this is, it's a great thing. I mean, the Queenie interchange at Glendale is something that is needed. But to me, it's just another reminder that this council needs to keep our foot on the pedal and keep pushing what we feel are important initiatives in the municipality at the regional level. Later that day, Councillor Foster and I attended the Penn West Power meeting on May the 8th at Pelham Town Hall. Items that were on the agenda that day: KPMG presentation of the draft financial statements for 2017, which we approved the 2017 draft financials after reviewing them, received the president report, and set the date for the annual corporate meeting, which will be taking place later this week, Thursday, May 24th. Under communications, Councillor Foster and I want to bring to the council's attention that there was some correspondence that day with regards to a letter from Bennett Jones regarding the Quarry Road property. So some of the discussions that took place at that meeting at Penn West Hydro were items that we have brought forward to our CAO, and Mr. Kirkopoulos has been in discussion with the president, Brian Walker, of Penn West Hydro. So Councillor Foster and I, in the effort of open and transparency, want to bring it to the attention that this was on the agenda. We will continue to be present for these meetings and be cognizant and be open and transparent, so that if there is anything moving forward, and we're hopeful that it's not, that CAO Kirkopoulos and President Walker can resolve any of those outstanding concerns, but that Councillor Foster and I, at some point in time, might have to declare a conflict of interest. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. May 6th, I attended Grimsby's ceremony for the Battle of the Atlantic and spoke on behalf of council and yourself. It was a remembrance service of the men and women who served and those that gave their lives in service in what was the longest military campaign of World War II. It was well attended, and there was lots of ceremony with them placing a wreath on the water with the Coast Guard vehicle and the Gamaroo folks there from Grimsby. And then on May 7th, they attended an NPEI meeting as well with Mayor Easton. So, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor McMillan.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Last week at our regular meeting of the library board, the board members were able to take another tour of the Rittenhouse Library and noted the completed renovations that had taken place in the library. There was a great deal of praise and thanks to his town staff and to the library pages that worked so hard to get this event and these renovations all completed. The deputy CEO, Janice Coles, she wrote about this in the latest library newsletter, and I would like to read a portion of what she has written, just so we can get this into the record, and the notations that she made about that particular those particular renovations at Rittenhouse. And she says, "Many thanks to the town of Lincoln for making this happen and for the invaluable assistance of town staff members." And she does name the staff members that were so much involved in this, but first names only. Chuck, Sean, Jerry, Blair, Andy, Tom, Amanda, Jack, and Chris. And also a very special thanks to the hardworking pages that worked on this renovations. That's Carly and Jillian and Kira, Madeline, Noah, Sifa, and Summer. And she also writes, "We also appreciate the help of the library board member, Donna Burton, a retired librarian whose experience in moving the library was invaluable. the library staff members, Dina, Jennifer, and Leanne, Pat and Skyle and Veronica, all pitched in. So it was a very, very successful renovation. The building looks absolutely great. The new carpet that went in and the rearrangement of the stacks makes it a much more inviting scene. So thanks very much to all the people who were involved in that, and particularly the town staff and the library staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor McPherson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Last week was the monthly BIA meeting, and we had another full agenda and also a full house. Pleased just to let everybody know that we had 10 attendees at that meeting, all of the board as well as others that came to join us. We went through the regular agenda items: finance, beautification, marketing events and whatnot, but we also spent some time on feedback from an information session that was held in the evening for the BIA members. Also the National Conference of the OBIAA, which our executive director attended. Also covered off the expansion, potential BIA expansion, and the rules around that expansion and what needs to be done. There was a report of a downtown survey results, which are very interesting, and I recommended that the BIA collect them, consolidate, and submit them to council just to hear what, I believe there was 56 that submitted surveys, what our local residents and our BIA members are interested in. There was a discussion around rebranding of the BIA, as well as associate membership. So a very quick 1 hour meeting. I should also mention that parking in the downtown core was discussed, and it was agreed that a separate meeting be scheduled to get into a more robust discussion around parking downtown. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Timmers.
Thank you, Mayor Easton. I attended a few events in the last couple of weeks. May 10th, I attended the Every Bowl Full event at In on the 20 in Jordan. It's an annual, it was the second actual fundraiser for Community Care West Niagara, and there were about 200 people there. It was a great event. The keynote speaker was Lori Nickel, and she is the Executive Director for foodrescue.ca, and she's also the Director of Programs and for Second Harvest. Really interesting initiative that was launched in Niagara recently. Very good night, a great turnout. I also wanted to talk about the First Beamsville Scouting and their night that they came here to learn about local politics. And it was a great night, and they had some pretty difficult questions, and we had a lot of fun with the scouts that came and the leaders. And I think our CAO had spoke about this at a prior meeting, but the main thing the scouts wanted to know was about potholes and snow removal, and they had some pretty good questions. They were very bright boys and girls in that group. On May 21st, the First Beamsville Scouts had a tree planting at Bonbury Park, and they planted 27 trees. I can't wait for them to start growing. It's just going to look fantastic. And the Lions in the town of Lincoln actually were planting some trees as well, and they planted 100 up at the Lions Sports Park. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Pachariba.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I was just going to mention to the Community Care of West Niagara's Every Bowl Full, they had kind of reached out and wanted to help sell tickets to the event. So Councillor Brunet and his wife Janice, Councillor Foster and his wife Sue myself, my wife Melanie, who very rarely comes to any town event, was there in person. Mike, sorry you missed her because you couldn't get a babysitter. My mother-in-law and John Fraccioni from FBH were all there. We had a great night. It was really interesting to hear Lori Nickel. And you know what? One of the moving things was George Stevenson and his grace. And he said, hopefully, at one point in time, if we all do our part, that an agency like Community Care will no longer be needed in our town. And that really hit home. And you know what? It's every bowl full, and it's like everything. You know what? If everyone does their part, we can get rid of a lot of things and make the town a better place.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you all for all the activities you've been involved in. Is there anything that you would like to have as the final word, Councillor Foster?
Oh, I was at most of these events with everything else, and I love the way that they've mentioned how great they are. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your attendance as well. We'll move on to delegations, and we have one delegation this evening, and I call upon Dr. Valerie Yeager, who I mentioned to you earlier, will provide a presentation on public health and communities. And this is the part of the agenda, ladies and gentlemen, that I would encourage you to watch more than once, because the message is very powerful and extremely important for our future.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and thank you all councillors for the opportunity to speak with you here. As usual, my words are relatively brief, but I hope to engage in any questions that you may have afterwards. I would just like to comment as a follow-up to one of the recent statements. I was also moved by the grace that if we all do our part, we won't be, these type of events won't be needed. And it reminded me of my interview to get to the job as Medical Officer of Health for Niagara, where I was asked, what's your vision for public health in Niagara? And I said, to become irrelevant. And I don't think it was really perhaps what they wanted or what they're looking for, but the motive is the same, that the things that we are striving for will become so much a part of people's lives, so much a part of society, that we won't need formal things which are labeled public health. However, we are not there, so this is a little bit of a history of public health in Ontario and coming around to some of the things that are happening in Lincoln, and finally addressing a little bit a question that was posed to me actually by Councillor McPherson, is what is the most important way in which this council can engage in promoting the public health of people in Lincoln? And again, I'm not quite certain it would be an expected answer. Municipalities where public health lives, or public health lives here, I absolutely believe this. I think this is foundational to the essence of public health. Public health has been defined in many ways, but one of the ones that I like the most is that the art of public health is to promote health and protect citizens from disease and injury through the organized efforts of society. And it is at the municipal level, I think, where that organized efforts of society most plays out in municipal government, but also in some of the agencies which we heard mentioned tonight, Community Care, our faith-based community, the Scouts community. These are all part of the organized efforts of society, which are so important. In 1833, the legislature of Upper Canada passed an act to allow local municipalities, quote, to establish boards of health to guard against introduction of malignant, contagious, and infection diseases in this province. So that was 1833. Public health has been entrenched in municipality ever since that time. The number of boards of health steadily increased till 1934, where there were 800 local boards of health with 700 part-time medical officers of health of varying degrees of ability, I'm certain. And since then, it's been a process of consolidation of the number of public health units and also increasing their responsibilities and greater provincial control and legislation and contribution to the financing of those health units. This was largely actually pushed following the Walkerton crisis in 2000, was the biggest change in financing of public health in Ontario. Public health currently has 35 health units. I'm going to talk a little bit about the organization and governance of public health, and then a bit about the health of the public, which is not exactly the same thing. In Niagara, we are down in what's the Central West region. In Niagara, the Board of Health is the regional government, the regional municipality of Niagara. There are 7 boards of health that have that type of governance. There are 20 boards of health which are called freestanding. In other words, they have representatives from things which are called obligate municipalities, and they also have order in council provincial appointments. And there are 7 boards of health which are part of single-tier municipal government. We can talk about health in many ways. I think the easiest way to think of it is life expectancy. It's sort of relatively easy to measure. It's a defined endpoint. And so let's start by talking about life expectancy in Canada. In Canada, life expectancy in BC is higher than any other province. It has been that way for a while. Ontario comes in a close second, and women are just slightly ahead of men, but not that much more anymore. And that is largely because women started to smoke, whereas they never used to smoke. And it really is that single factor which used to be the female advantage in life expectancy and doesn't exist so much anymore. All the nice things about estrogen having a protective effect were thrown out the window a number of years ago. Determinants of health in Canada are similar across North America and the Western world, income and social status being one of probably the primary determinant of health. The other ones that are listed here are not necessarily in order, and this will vary a bit from country to country. But if we go down the list, so much of these are under the direct or indirect influence of local municipal government. Income and social status, your emphasis on your visioning statement of Lincoln as a place to prosper, absolutely. Social support networks, a place to belong. Education and literacy, the things you have invested in museums and libraries. Social environments, very similar to that. Physical environments, all the work of the planning department and parks and recreation also. Personal health practices, perhaps not so much, although the influences of summer camps for kids certainly have an effect on that. Healthy child development, genetics, probably not. In fact, we generally don't like to live in societies that engage in that type of activity. And health services, certainly this council and those of West Niagara. I mean, in fact, every municipal council that I have spoken to has been very concerned, and rightly so, about the health services available to its residents. So what is the population health approach? It is an approach that focuses trying to get at root causes, tries to prevent the problem, improves the health status of the whole society while considering special needs of subpopulations. And this is a bit of a microcosm of something that government in general, I think, is tasked to doing, to raise the bar for all of society, but also by making certain that there are groups that don't fall behind and that might need special attention. To focus on partnerships and intersectoral collaborations. So in our context here, for example, public health is not part of Mike's team. On the other hand, it is part of his wider conception of who should be on the team and who can be on the team. So there's lots of opportunity, even though an agency may not be part of the same umbrella, to work together. To find flexible and multidimensional solutions to complex problems, and these are very complex problems. I copied this, so this is on the list of what anybody would say is a population health approach, and it is actually true. On the other hand, my father, the mathematician, tried to teach me to always find the single elegant solution. So there sometimes are single elegant solutions to multidimensional and complex problems. So, for example, buckling up on one seatbelt, it's a fairly simple solution to a whole host of multi-vehicle things. Having laws on drinking ages and zero tolerance for alcohol was a fairly simple solution to a multitude of problems. But we always try to promote public involvement and community participation. Having said that, there's something called the Health Impact Pyramid, and this is something that shows a number of different factors and how effective they are at having impact on good health in the population. It's interestingly that they are in reverse order of factors which require individual input and application of free will, if you like. So at the bottom are socioeconomic factors, and certainly the role of municipalities is very, very clear here, and I think that Lincoln is making great strides in this direction. Second to that is changing the context so that, in a sense, the default choice is the healthy choice. So in this area, we would find things such as provision of clean water, making it the law to use seat belts, smoke-free outdoor and indoor spaces, the presence of paths and routes that encourage walking, and those kinds of things. Prevention intervention factors are things such as vaccination. Clinical interventions are things such as blood pressure medication. And you'll see at the top, education. And I think a lot of times we put a lot of emphasis on education. And it's not that it's not important. It is that it is quite difficult to instill in people. And anybody who's been a parent or a teacher or anybody who tries to get a group of people to change their behavior knows how many times that one has to work at that. However, having said that, once you get it, it tends to have long-lasting effects. This is a slide actually from the U.S. government. They have studied the interaction of parks and recreation and physical activity on healthy behaviors much more than has been done in Canada, I'm afraid to say. But for example, people who take advantage of public parks are 3 times more likely to achieve the recommended daily amounts of weekly amounts of physical activity. And kids who participate in parks and recreation programs are 20% more knowledgeable about fruits and vegetables. So it's not just the physical activity side of things, although that's very important. It's all the recreation, the healthier eating, and the knowledge. And there are a few other examples listed here. This is a community inventory of the facilities in this area available in Lincoln. And if you have specific questions, I'm certain any one of my SMT colleagues who are here could happily address those. The next slide just shows how well the 2 areas of public health and parks and recreation are aligned. And I'm very happy that Lincoln is starting to form some direct reaching out, I'd say, is the stage we're at with public health in making a partnership and discussing how we can work together with the Parks and Rec and community and social services in general to create healthier, sustainable communities. There is no doubt from a financial side, and this is again from the U.S. Public Health Service, that recreation is one of the best buys in public health, coming right after vaccination is one of the cheapest ways to make a big difference. Since this is Public Works Week, I'm going to finish up with a picture, well, get close to finishing up with a picture of, this is the Broad Street Pump in London. It is a pump without a pump handle. It is a pump without a pump handle because I'm going to get the date wrong, 1854, Dr. John Snow started making a map with dots of all the cases of cholera in Soho in London. And he was working with an Anglican church minister by the name of the Reverend Henry Whitehead at the same time, and together they created this map. And he could see from the location of the dots, and he tracked where the people got their water. And it came from this particular pump here. So at the time, and this is a quote from him, I had an interview with the Board of Guardians of St. James Parish on the evening of the 7th of September and represented the above circumstances to them. In consequence of what I said, the handle of the pump was removed the following day. And this particular pump connected to a water source which was very close to a cesspool, and cholera was spreading through fecal contamination of the water. See, the pump handle was removed in 1854 and was never replaced. It was deemed that source of water could not be ever considered safe. Unlike today, when the St. James Parish would have had an obligation to provide other water to the citizens of St. James Parish, that was not, in fact, the case at the time, and I'm afraid they just had to walk further in order to get the water. But it is one of the turning points in public health, both from the standpoint of one of the first direct connections of a disease to unclean water, and also the first evidence of using epidemiology or tracking cases in order to find a solution. Which brings me around to that this is Public Works Week, and so thank you so much to our public health staff who provide clean water. It is still one of the top 10 achievements of public health. And like many of the achievements of public health, it's not one that is actually carried out by public health anymore. It gets passed on to other parts of society, of government, and working in other areas to carry on. Similarly, as I mentioned before, also on clean water, after Walkerton, the balance of funding and statutory requirements shifted from really being more individually based to being provincially based through the Ontario Public Health Standards, which were just revised last year, although the revision of the standards does allow for a significant portion of variability, because not every public health unit is, of course, the same. We vary from ones of 35,000 people with an area the size of France to Toronto Public Health at 2.7 million and 630 square kilometers. Niagara is at 450,000, is sort of one of the middle, medium-sized public health units. Getting back to what is the biggest role of council in these areas. In health promotion, I think it is the creation of suitable public spaces, the infrastructure that allows physical activity, that allows social interaction, that is nice to the eye, that improves mental health, and gives kids a chance to play and grow. In the area of health protection, I think it is the maintenance of clean water, which takes up a certain amount of dollars and a lot of diligence. So Mary Easton showed me a logic model that she had used many times before, and this is a variation of it. So what does it take to do almost anything in fiscal resources, material resources, and human resources? And these are fed into and supported by policy and governance, which in turn has an influence on management and feedback there, which in turn influences operational decisions, and then they use those other resources. So municipal council working in the areas of policy and governance is in a pivotal, very important position. And I think, in my sense, my impression rather, a very difficult position, and I'll try and explain myself a bit more. I've been asked what I consider the greatest public health challenge, or currently, and it is one that I think has been the challenge for a while, and unfortunately I don't see a near end to it. And that is the ever-increasing tendency to discount reason, to discount evidence, to discount rational thought in favor of a whim or how an idea of the moment. And it's not that I discount different opinions. In fact, I absolutely embrace them and I listen to all of them. But at some point, I think there has to be some synthesis and some acknowledgement of the responsibility to listen to facts and try and come with an opinion based on that. So I think the biggest challenge is that one needs, and I think this is the case for a public health physician as well as an elected official, you always need to listen to listen to one person who calls you or one complaint that's made, because you never know, as in the case of Dr. Snow, whether that is the one that you need to listen to. At the same time, listen to one and govern on behalf of the many. And that's a very, very difficult challenge, and I thank you for taking it on. And that's you.
Well, I'm going to ask Councillor McPherson, since he posed that first question to you, whether what his response would be if he has any further questions of you.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor, and it is more clear, for sure, that I mean, there are things that are painfully obviously to us. Water, for sure, is front of mind for our council, and keeping the water system crystal clear for our residents. What wasn't as clear is some of the other things that you mentioned, and I think that the work that's being done with the Active Transportation Committee and creating all of those safer things for our residents as far as speeds on roads and bicycle paths and walking and the connecting to parks and things like that. So from a physical standpoint, that was made more clear. The other thing, I think, is that feeling of place, and that being proud of where we live and our our environment, our arenas, our downtowns, our all of the things that are Lincoln, and just that whole feeling of being proud of where you are and where you live. So those are some of the things that came more clear to me after I posed that first question: how do we impact public health as counselors? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a good question, Councillor McPherson. Anyone else? Councillor Foster.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Easton. And it was interesting through your whole discussion. I'm scribbling notes all over the place, so actually I hope I have a coherent comment, although sometimes I don't.
I just realized I need to give the clerk some scribbled comments. Anyway, I'm sorry, continue.
One of the things that you've mentioned within the presentation and the view of particularly parks and recreation and the things that we have to do, I've really always felt as a council that we have not spent enough time on our parks. In other words, we're all real quick to go and say, there's a space, we're going to have the space, let's do something with the space. And then we decide to do a few things as it's going on. And I'm kind of looking at, and by the way, I think Prokich Park, I give the councillors credit and us as a council for maybe taking a little differing view of that one, but it just seems to me we have to spend more time and effort to get these things right. We're right now doing some changes to Conkle Creek at the bottom end. It is the potential for a beautiful space for community to go and do things, and I seem to, as a councillor, get the complaints of, oh my goodness, people are going to be walking close to my backyard. How dare they do that? And I keep thinking we're right out to lunch with that kind of thinking. Like we have to, as a community, be promoting and doing that to get people out and to do things. Simple things. I give credit to community services for putting out those garbage cans. Great, like people are actually, they're kind of excited within the community to go, that's a simple thing this is going on to help some of our improvements with those areas. As stupid as it sounds, I suggested the doggy bags to be going out for people as well. I mean, there's a problem in the community. A simple thing, as you had mentioned, it's those little things as we do them one by one, and we hope that the community moves along and goes with it. So this is a great presentation, and I really appreciate the work that you've been doing with the municipality. Thank you.
Councillor Timmers. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor Easton. And thank you, Dr. Yeager. It's been a pleasure getting to chat with you and learn from you and to have your input in our community for the past 6 months and all the work that you've been doing. We've been very fortunate to have you here. And I'm going to kind of echo Councillor McPherson. This was a very good report. It gave me a whole different idea of how to view our community. Aside from policy and governance and bylaws, and we really need to look at our community in a holistic view. We need to look at all those determinants of health. And when we're making our plans and making our decisions, we really need to look at all of those very, very closely, because if we're a healthy community, we can guide that to promote the health in our community and to increase it and encourage it. And if there's the green space for physical and well-being and the parks, it really brought it home how important those parks are and the programming that happens at, within the SRC department. And it's incredibly important. And if we look at, I just think I'm looking at the community in a whole different way, like aside from just the municipal part, like as a whole and the health. So I really appreciate your report tonight, and I think we have some great tools moving forward. So thank you very much.
If I might, Madam Mayor, so thank you. And I would like to emphasize that you have all the knowledge here in your senior staff. These slides came from Sarah and Community and Social Services, and I know Kathleen in Planning has all the knowledge about what makes a difference, what makes the community more walkable, how to connect the bits, and same thing with Jillian and David in Public Works. And I would just like to say a piece about the crystal clear water. Do not ever take that for granted. I don't think this council does. It is a slippery slope. Flint, Michigan is probably the front and center example of how not to do governance and financial irresponsibility as applies to water management. But it is something for which thank you for being ever vigilant on that, and please do not ever assume that it is a given, because it is given as long as it's tended, I guess, after it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pachariba.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Dr. Yeager, thank you very much for your presentations. Very thought-provoking. Councillor Foster made a comment about, things that we used to do. Smoking at the in the doctor's office. The doctor smoked when you were there at your for your appointment in the office, in the setting. But times have changed, and I think, you know what, your whole presentation is summed up, and I don't mean to minimize it, but recreation as an essential medicine. Mm-hmm. I think often we forget about that, and as times change, we need to change. And being the policy and the governance makers, we used to see storm retention ponds as a liability. They're an opportunity. And I think through all of this, you've just further cemented in my mind, and this was one of the things that my father used to always tell me, don't tell me we can't, tell me how we can. And you have jacked me up with the how we can, so I'm going to be using this, so thank you very much.
This will be a wonderful thing for Dr. Yeager to have a group of people who understand even 20% of what she had to say, because I have sat in meetings with her, and it is like just information. It's like manna falling on deaf ears. So congratulations to all
Absolutely.
of you, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much for coming in and sharing this with us. Certainly what struck me the most was actually the second to last slide, and with regards to the fact that as a council we have the responsibility of developing that policy and having the vision to develop that policy. We also have the responsibility to provide the material resources, the human resources, and the fiscal resources in order to have the outcomes that we see as the vision for our community. So anyway, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. And I would comment, Dr. Yeager, as well on the contributions that have also been made locally by women's institutes who certainly operated successfully in small communities to achieve the sterilization of cow's milk and ensuring that the yellow line, which probably wasn't yellow but white, was put down the middle of the road for road safety. And there's actually quite a litany of things that they contributed to because there probably weren't there wasn't the influence directly of public health in those small communities, so.
Including founding Brock University.
Including, yes, the implementation of Brock University, absolutely. So this is step one, and I was pleased to be able to find that logic model because it was one that I'm very familiar with. This is a great feedback loop that you've included here. The rest of it gets pretty complicated, but it does get everybody to the table that needs to be there, and it does clarify what people's roles are. So as we move forward with some of our decisions, I appreciate that you've acknowledged what we know, and that is that the staff do have the knowledge. I think that what you have brought to it, to the discussion, is this specialist, generalist perspective on the subject in a very focused way, and that provides council with the message that it is possible for us to influence these very complex elements of community development. And so I'm hoping that our relationship will continue even if you are in the West, although I can't imagine why you would want to go there. Thank you very much, Dr. Yeager, very much appreciated. And Council, I have a motion moved by Councillor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Foster that the delegation by Dr. Valerie Yeager on public health and communities be received. Any further comments? Your pleasure on the motion? The motion is carried. We have no correspondence this evening. And we move on to reports, beginning with the Infrastructure Committee minutes of May 9th, 2018. Councillor Brunet, would you care to provide the highlights of this meeting?
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Mayor. The following are highlights regarding the minutes of the Infrastructure Committee meeting held on May 9th, 2018. Committee received one delegation from Jillian Harris, the Manager of Environmental Services, who provided an update on the Jordan and Camden II study. The committee received 3 correspondence, all being the minutes of the Active Transportation Committee minutes of meetings January 5th, February 22nd, and March 22nd, 2018. The committee that evening received 3 reports regarding number 1, PW 18-13, service line warranties, a warranty program for water and sewer service connections. PW 18-15, the Sandy Cove Road Allowance, and PW 18-16, the Regional CSO Program Funding Information Update. Full details regarding the meeting can be found on the agenda and minutes published on the town's website. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have a motion moved by Councillor Brunet and seconded by Councillor Timmers that the minutes of the May 9th, 2018 Infrastructure Committee be adopted as circulated. Are there any questions to the report? Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just under council inquiries, we do have a reference to staff providing comments around a project, but the project is not named in the inquiry under the council inquiries, and I would suggest that we do that. It was the 13th Street project. We talk a lot about a project and then going out for engineering, and there's no reference to what the project is. So I just think it would make some sense to have that particular project put into that council inquiry section.
Okay, thank you very
Madam Mayor.
much. Is that satisfactory with the mover and seconder? I'll change that as amended. I think I'll just pass it down for a couple of initials. Madam Clerk, you've taken note of that comment. Thank you. The motion now reads, moved by Councillor Brunet, seconded by Councillor Timmers, that the minutes of May 9th, 2018 Infrastructure Committee be adopted as amended. Your pleasure on the motion? The motion is carried. We move now to the Planning Committee minutes of May 14th. Councillor Thompson, would you care to provide highlights of the meeting?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The following are highlights of the meeting of the Planning Committee, Town of Lincoln, May 14th, 2018, held here in council chambers. The meeting commenced with one public hearing regarding the zoning bylaw amendment application by Corneef Produce Incorporated, report PL 18-26. This was presented by David Riley, SGL Planning, on behalf of Corneef Produce. The following public hearing committee received 5 delegations regarding various reports on the agenda. A motion was approved to suspend section 13.11 of the procedural bylaw to allow some unscheduled delegations. The committee then dealt with 8 staff reports addressing matters including PL 1827, which is the Beamsville GO Transit Secondary Plan, PL 18-28, request to consider a minor variance application by Agribra Ontario Incorporated, PL 18-29, subdivision agreement Cherry Heights, PL 18-30, an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment application by Cuesta Estates Winery, PL 18-31, proposed revisions to the animal care and control bylaw, PL 1832, January to March 2018 building permit activity, PL 18-33, request for site plan and tax increment financing assumption agreements by Houghton Investment Corporation, and finally PL 18-34, proposed revisions to the Clean Yards bylaw. Committee then moved into closed session to consider a proposed or pending acquisition of land pertaining to the District School Board of Niagara and the Ontario Municipal Affairs and Housing, and the meeting was adjourned at 9:42. If you wish to have any more details, please visit the website at lincoln.ca.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I have a motion moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Foster, that the minutes of the May 14th, 2018 Planning Committee, including the confidential item, be adopted as circulated. Are there any questions to the report? Your pleasure on the motion. The motion is carried. We move on to the Committee of the Whole Business Planning minutes of May 16th, 2018. Councillor Foster, would you care to provide highlights of the meeting?
Thank you, Mayor Easton. The following are the highlights of our committee meeting that was held on May the 16th, 2018. We had 2 delegations that evening. The first was Alyssa Lay and Kate Whalen from Civic Action Diverse City Fellows. And they presented our journey exploring notions of diversity and inclusion, which I'm going to comment on a little bit further on. Second was from Dr. Andrea Feller, who's the Associate Medical Officer of Health in the region of Niagara, and also from Glenn Walker, who is co-chair of OPEN, OPENN, which means Overdose Prevention and Education Network of Niagara. Again, another very good presentation given to us. The final item of the meeting was a committee report concerning the appointment of an integrity commissioner. Our recent OSUM committee, or our recent OSUM conference, held numerous discussions in this area, and in fact, we are quite ahead of the curve when it comes to both our code of conduct and also integrity commissioners. So kudos to our municipality for that. The full details of the meeting can be found in the agenda and minutes published on the town's website. So I did want to make one comment on this. First of all, I was extremely proud to be the chair of that particular committee meeting. The discussions around both diversity and around the overdose prevention were excellent. I thought it was a very high standard for our council to be going that particular evening. And I just wanted to make comment. We did have some notes come back to us from Alyssa after the meeting, and I thought it'd be worthwhile just sharing that with the public. And so the 2 ladies, Kate and I, were chatting on the way back, and we're both struck by how genuine councillors were in wanting to understand the issue, which of course in this case was diversity, and be deliberate to make change. The questions were all very thoughtful, and we enjoyed the level of engagement, curiosity, and interest in the issue. The town is lucky to have such an engaged and caring council. And I think that summarized very well the discussions that did go on that evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. There's no confirmation of compliance with Section 34 of the Planning Act this evening, but we have 10 bylaws for consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to comment on this process of bylaws. This is 10 bylaws is not just a recital of numbers, but it represents significant work that's being achieved by the town. And I think that it fits in very well with earlier comments that we've had about the way in which we identify priorities, the kind of public input that supports the development of those priorities, and then the work that needs to be done in order to achieve them. And these 10 bylaws actually cover work done by the Planning Department and Economic Development. Some relate to growth and governance, to revenue generating, to long-term care and senior support. The Go Transit file is one over the last 2 years that Mr. Kirkopoulos tells me that the workload with that file can be associated to 2 years of work to develop the secondary plan for Prudhome's. I think that's a pretty significant piece of work. And of course, there are bylaws that support the Center of Excellence for Agriculture and our official plan. And here they are. Moved by Councillor McPherson and seconded by Councillor Pachariva, that leave be given to introduce the following bylaws. Bylaw number 2018-32 to adopt official plan amendment number 4, Go Transit. Bylaw 2018-33 to adopt official plan amendment number 5, Cuesta Estates Winery. Bylaw 2018-34, Z511, to amend the zoning bylaw to permit a banquet center, Cuesta Estates Winery. Bylaw number 2018-35, to authorize subdivision agreement with Agribur Ontario, Inc. Bylaw 2018-36, to authorize site plan assumption agreement and a tax increment financing assumption agreement with Hoden Investment Corporation. Bylaw 2018-37, to authorize the Town of Lincoln to enter into a site plan agreement with 2583478 Ontario Limited. Bylaw 2018-38, to appoint Integrity Commissioner. Bylaw 2018-39, to adopt 2018 fees and charges. Bylaw 2018-40, to authorize the execution of a site plan agreement with Flavor Art North America, Inc. Bylaw 2018-41, to authorize the execution of a site plan agreement with United Mennonite Home for the Aged. Bylaw 2018-42, to exempt certain lands in registered plan number 30M441 from part lot control, Lincoln Heights, pursuant to Section 50 of the Planning Act RSO 1990. Your pleasure on the motion. The motion is carried. Ladies and gentlemen, each of these bylaws have been addressed at committee level and have received extensive discussion by the associated committee members. Your pleasure on the motion? Motion is carried. Now, I have a motion moved by Councillor McPherson and seconded by Councillor Pachariva that bylaw numbers 2018-32, 33, 34-Z511, 2018-35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, and 42 read a first time be now read a second and third time and finally passed, and that the mayor and clerk sign and seal the said bylaw. Any questions? Your pleasure on the motion? The motion is carried. Are there any councillor inquiries? There being none, are there any notices of motion? Councillor McPherson? No?
Pardon me, Mayor.
Not yet, not yet. Are there any announcements, Councillor McPherson? I don't see why I should be the only person that gets the wrong spot.
If you would allow me, Mayor Easton, I do have an announcement, a couple of announcements actually, and one is best read. So the Beamsville BIA has been working on a community arts project to not only satisfy their mandate for beautification, but also engage our youth, our downtown business and wineries and brewery. So they've been working on this for some time. So the Downtown Beamsville BIA has partnered with 8 local wineries: Calamus, Cornerstone, Feeling Estate, Peninsula Ridge, Malivoire, Siouan Staff, 30 Bench, Vianney, and a local brewery, Bench Brewing Company. The Beamsville Decorating Center, Action Print, Dean's No Frills, Turner and Associates, and Conversations Cafe, and the students of Beamsville District Secondary School, both the Arts Department as well as the Specialist High Skills Horticultural Department, and the Town of Lincoln to bring beautiful wine barrel painted planters to the streets of the downtown filled with stunning plants and flowers. With the Town of Lincoln being home to over 50 wineries and rich soil for farming and greenhouses, the board of the Downtown Business BIA was looking for a way to not only bring more color into the downtown, but also to engage the community. Bringing the wonderful wineries and breweries surrounding downtown Beamsville into the project was a priority, as well as a way for downtown Beamsville to be more engaged with the wineries and brewery that surround us and are vital to our community. Always looking for an opportunity to engage the youth in the downtown, as well as leverage the skill set that the youth have. It was important for the Downtown Beamsville BIA to showcase all of that through a community arts project, a wonderful partnership. So what is happening is that there is 9 barrels that will be painted, and there will be plants inside the barrels, and they will be set up around King Street in the downtown. So that will happen. There's an official piece of that June 19th, 1 to 2:30 p.m. in the afternoon. But what is also very exciting about this is that this project, if you'll bear with me, has been selected by the Garden Days Provincial group as the flagship event for Ontario. So this Barrels, what's called Barrels Bloom, Downtown Beamsville Community Arts Project is going to be the flagship event for Gardens Day Provincial, the Provincial Association. So we're very, very proud of the efforts of the BIA, and also bringing in all these great partners to really demonstrate a nice collaborative to help beautify our downtown. The other announcement I have is a much shorter one. And that is that the Beamsville BIA Farmers Market will start June 2nd, along with the Touch a Truck event. The Farmers Market is moving to the Fleming Center this year, so that will be a nice way to kick off the Farmers Market as well. So hope that we'll be able to share with the many hundreds that will be coming down for the Touch a Truck that will also see the Farmers Market, and we'll start the year off that way. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I think we were all very, very delighted to hear that news, and certainly it came at a wonderful time because at the beginning of this term, it was really an uphill battle. It was Sisyphus for sure, pushing that rock, and now things are starting to come forward for all the downtown businesses, and they're working together. It really is very, very encouraging, and a lot of credit goes out to everybody involved. So we look forward to that artwork on the main street. And as the BIAs grow in town, let's hope that we'll see them in other places as well. Any comments at all to that report? It was such a good piece of news. Thank you very much, Councillor. Any other announcements? There being none, we do not have a closed session item this evening. But I do have a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council. Moved by Councillor McMillan and seconded by Councillor McPherson, that leave be given to introduce the following bylaw, number 2018-43, to adopt, confirm, and ratify matters dealt with by council resolution. Your pleasure on the motion. The motion is carried. And a motion moved by Councillor McMillan and seconded by Councillor Pachariba, that bylaw number 2018-43 read a first time, be now read a second and third time, and finally passed, and that the mayor and clerk sign and seal the said bylaw. Your pleasure on the motion? The motion is carried. Business of this council having been completed as circulated and published, I call the meeting adjourned. Thank you, councillors. Thank you very much, truly. Staff.